It was a warm afternoon in a small city outside Atlanta. The sun hung low, casting golden light over the streets, and the air was filled with the usual weekend noise. Cars passing, music playing from open windows, and the smell of food drifting from the nearby diner on the corner. A man named David had just finished a long morning at work. He ran a small auto repair shop a few blocks away and decided to close early that day. His hands were still marked with engine grease and his shirt carried faint oil stains, but he didn't care much. He was hungry and tired. A good meal sounded like the perfect way to end the day. He parked his old pickup truck outside the diner, the same one he visited at least once a week. It wasn't anything fancy, just a family-run place with friendly staff and the best fried chicken in town. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside and a waitress greeted him with a smile. "Hey there, you want your usual?" she asked. "Yeah, please," he said, giving her a small smile. He took a seat near the window where he could watch the people outside. Families were walking by, kids with ice cream cones, teenagers hanging around the corner store. It was one of those calm, ordinary afternoons where nothing seemed out of place. As David waited for his food, he scrolled through his phone, checked a few messages, and then leaned back with a sigh. The radio played softly in the background, an old R&B song, and he found himself humming along. Everything felt normal. But then something caught his ear. At first it sounded like a distant shout, maybe kids playing. He didn't pay much attention. But then came another sound, sharper, higher, a cry. It was faint but clear enough to make him pause. He turned toward the window. Outside, the street looked calm as usual, but the sound had definitely come from somewhere close. He frowned, got up from his seat, and walked to the door. "Everything all right?" the waitress asked. "Yeah, just thought I heard something," he said as he pushed open the door. Stepping outside, he looked around. The sun was brighter now, the air heavier, and the sound seemed to come from the side alley next to the diner. It was the kind of narrow space used mostly for trash bins and deliveries, not somewhere people usually went. He hesitated for a second. Maybe he was overthinking it, but then he heard it again. A muffled scream. That was all it took. He started walking quickly toward the sound, his heart beating faster. When he turned the corner, he froze. About 20 feet ahead, behind the diner, a white van was parked with its side door open. Two men stood near it, one inside the van, one outside. They were struggling with something or someone. For a second, David couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. Then he saw a small hand reach out from the van's doorway, trying to push away. It was a child. David's stomach dropped. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, kicking and crying as one of the men tried to pull him inside. "Hey!" David shouted instinctively. The men froze and turned toward him. For a split second, everyone just stared. Then the man outside the van muttered something and ran. The other one jumped into the driver's seat. David didn't think. He just ran. He sprinted toward the van as the engine roared to life. The driver was trying to close the door, but David got there first, grabbed it, and yanked it open with all his strength. The boy tumbled forward, landing halfway out, and David caught him just before he hit the ground. "Got you, kid," he said, his voice shaking. The van screeched as the driver hit the gas, and it sped down the alley, nearly clipping the wall. Within seconds, it was gone. For a moment, everything went quiet again except for the sound of the boy crying. David knelt down. Hey, you're okay. You're safe now," he said softly, trying to calm him. The boy was shaking, his small hands clutching David's shirt tightly. "Where's your mom or dad?" David asked, looking around. The boy just shook his head, too scared to speak. People started gathering near the end of the alley. Someone had called the police, and within minutes, sirens echoed in the distance. The boy stayed close to David, who refused to let go of him until the officers arrived. When the police got there, they quickly took control of the scene. David explained what he saw, pointing toward the direction the van had gone. The boy was taken to an officer's car, where a woman in uniform wrapped him in a blanket and gave him water. David stood nearby, still catching his breath. He wasn't sure what had just happened. Everything had happened so fast, from hearing the scream to pulling the boy out of the van. It didn't feel real. One of the officers approached him. "Sir, that was brave of you. You probably saved that child's life." David shrugged, still trying to calm down. "I just did what anyone would do," he said quietly. "Not everyone would have run toward danger," the officer said. "You did the right thing. They took David's statement, asked for his contact information, and told him they might need to follow up. The boy was still too shaken to talk much, but he managed to whisper his first name, Eli, and say that the men had told him not to scream. The officers nodded, exchanged looks, and said they'd investigate immediately. As the situation settled, the small crowd that had gathered began to cheer softly, some clapping. A few people recorded on their phones calling David a hero. He felt embarrassed but smiled politely. He didn't like attention, and he didn't see himself as a hero. He just couldn't imagine walking away and pretending not to hear a child in trouble. When everything was over, David walked back to his truck. His food at the diner had probably gone cold by now, but he didn't care. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, resting his head on the steering wheel, trying to process what had happened. His hands were trembling slightly. He thought about how easily he could have ignored the sound. He thought about what might have happened if he hadn't gone to look. The image of that little boy, scared and crying, stayed with him. Later that evening, after the police finished their investigation and took the boy to the station to contact his family, David finally went home. He lived alone in a small one-story house not far from his shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, a place where he could think and breathe. He turned on the TV while making a simple dinner, but every channel seemed to be talking about the same thing. Local man saves child from kidnapping attempt. His photo from earlier, taken by someone at the scene, was now on the screen. The reporter described what happened in detail, praising his quick reaction and courage. David watched for a while, shaking his head in disbelief. He hadn't expected this kind of attention. His phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, co-workers, even old classmates. Everyone was congratulating him, calling him a hero. He smiled a little, but deep down he just felt tired. It was strange how something that took less than 5 minutes could change your whole day, maybe even your whole life. Before going to bed, he stepped out onto his porch. The night air was cool and the street was quiet. He looked up at the stars and thought about the little boy. He hoped the kid was home safe by now, hugging his parents, maybe sleeping peacefully. For the first time in a long while, David felt something different inside him. A sense of purpose, maybe. Or just relief. He didn't know. All he knew was that today, in one random moment, he had been in the right place at the right time. He turned off the porch light and went inside. As he closed the door behind him, he didn't notice the dark car parked down the street, engine idling quietly. The headlights dimmed as he stepped away from the window, and the car rolled slowly into the night. For now, everything seemed peaceful again, but this was only the beginning. The next morning felt strange. The city had already moved on with its usual rhythm, cars rushing by, people going to work, neighbors watering their lawns, but for David, everything still felt stuck in that moment behind the diner. He hadn't slept much the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that white van speeding away, heard the sound of the boy crying. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cup until it went cold. His phone was still full of unread messages. People he hadn't spoken to in years had found his number. Some sent long voice notes about how proud they were of him. A few local news stations wanted to interview him. He didn't know what to say to any of them. He wasn't used to attention. He'd spent most of his life fixing cars, keeping to himself, doing his job quietly. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just a man who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Later that morning, there was a knock at his door. When he opened it, 2 police officers were standing outside, the same ones from the day before. They looked more relaxed this time, not like they had come with bad news. "Good morning, sir," one of them said politely. "We just wanted to thank you again for your help yesterday." David nodded and invited them in. They sat at the small kitchen table while he poured coffee for everyone. The younger officer opened his notebook. "We wanted to let you know the boy's parents came to the station last night. They were very grateful. The child is safe at home now." "That's good," David said softly, a small smile forming. He seemed so scared. The officer nodded. "He's doing better. He didn't say much, but he remembers you. Told his mom you were the man who saved him. She asked us to give you this." The officer pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table. Inside was a handwritten note on plain white paper. "Thank you for saving our son. We can never repay you, but please know you are in our prayers." The handwriting was neat and gentle, written by someone who had cried over every word. David read the note twice and felt something warm in his chest. "You can tell them I'm just glad he's okay," he said quietly. The officers chatted a bit longer, asked a few more questions about the van, and then stood to leave. Before walking out, one of them said, "You might see some detectives around the area this week. They're trying to find those men. We've got some leads." "Yeah, of course," David said. "Whatever helps." When they left, he stood at the window watching their car drive off. For a moment, everything felt calm again, but that calm didn't last long. By afternoon, people from the neighborhood had started coming by. Some brought food, others just wanted to shake his hand. A local reporter stopped by asking for a short interview. David politely declined. He didn't want to be on camera or make it a big thing. But the story had already spread online. That evening, when he went out to grab groceries, people recognized him at the store. A young woman stopped him near the produce aisle and said, "You're the guy from the news, right? You saved that little boy?" David nodded awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess so," she smiled. "You're amazing. We need more people like you." He thanked her, but inside he just felt uneasy. The more people talked about it, the more uncomfortable he became. He didn't like attention. He just wanted to go back to his normal life, fixing cars, paying bills, watching TV in the evenings. That night, he sat outside on his porch, eating a simple dinner while the crickets sang in the distance. The air was cool, and for the first time all day, he started to relax. He looked up at the stars and thought maybe things were finally settling down. But around 10 o'clock, something unusual happened. He heard an engine outside, a slow, steady rumble. It wasn't a neighbor's car. He lived on a quiet street, and by this time, everyone was usually inside. He stood up and looked through the window. A black SUV had turned onto his street and was creeping toward his house. It had no headlights on, just the faint glow from the street lamps reflecting off its dark paint. David felt a chill crawl down his neck. He stepped closer to the window but stayed behind the curtain. The SUV stopped right in front of his driveway. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The engine kept running softly. The windows were tinted, too dark to see inside. Then, slowly, the passenger window rolled down halfway. A man's face appeared, or rather the outline of one. He didn't say a word. He just looked toward the house. David couldn't tell if the man could see him through the curtain. The silence stretched on for what felt like minutes, but it was probably only a few seconds. Then, just as quietly as it had arrived, the SUV began to roll backward. It turned around at the corner and disappeared down the street. David stayed frozen in place. He didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone was lost. But deep down, something didn't feel right. He double-checked the locks on his doors and windows before going to bed. Still, he couldn't shake the image of that black vehicle outside his house. The next morning, he tried to brush it off. He went to work at his small repair shop, trying to focus on the cars waiting for service, but his mind kept drifting back to the night before. Around noon, while he was replacing a tire for a customer, a man in a suit walked into the shop. That was unusual. People in suits rarely came in there. "Can I help you?" David asked, wiping his hands with a rag. The man smiled politely. "You're the one who helped the boy, right?" David hesitated. "Yeah," the man nodded. "That was very brave of you. The family appreciates what you did." David looked at him closely. He didn't recognize the man, but there was something about him. The calm tone, the way he stood like he was used to being in control. "Are you with the police?" David asked. The man shook his head. "Not exactly. Let's just say I work with people who care about that boy's safety." "Who are you?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he handed David a small card with nothing on it but a phone number. "If anything unusual happens or if anyone comes asking questions that make you uncomfortable, call this number," the man said. "Someone will answer." Before David could ask another question, the man gave a polite nod and left. David looked down at the blank card. No name, no company, just a phone number. He didn't know what to think. That night, he couldn't stop wondering about it all. The van, the kidnappers, the black SUV, and now this mysterious man. None of it felt random anymore. When he turned on the TV later, the news anchor was still talking about the case. They mentioned that investigators believed the men who tried to take the boy might have known him. Something about the report made David pause. They said one of the suspects used to work for a private security company that handled high-profile clients. Wealthy families, executives, people with money and secrets. It made him wonder who that boy really was. By the end of the week, things started feeling strange around his neighborhood. He noticed cars he didn't recognize parked on his street. Sometimes they were gone by morning. Other times they stayed for hours with the engine off. He told himself it was just his imagination. But part of him knew better. One evening, as he was closing the shop, he noticed a small envelope stuck between his door and the frame. There was no name, no return address. Inside was a folded note with 3 words written in neat handwriting. "Stay out of it." David's hands tightened around the paper. His heart raced. He looked around the street, empty, quiet, nothing unusual. But for the first time, he felt real fear creeping in. Whoever had sent that note knew where he worked, maybe even where he lived. He went home and sat in silence for a long time, the note lying on the table beside him. He thought about calling the police, but then he remembered the man with the blank card and the phone number. After a long pause, he picked up his phone and dialed it. A voice answered almost immediately. Calm, steady and low. "Thank you for calling," the voice said. "We've been expecting you." David froze, unsure what to say. "Who is this?" he finally asked. "Someone who can help," the voice said. "But first we need to make sure you're safe. Don't talk to anyone about the note. We'll be in touch." Then the line went dead. David sat there, phone still in his hand, his mind racing. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted. But one thing was clear. Saving that little boy had pulled him into something far bigger than he ever expected. And deep down, he knew this wasn't over. The following days were uneasy. Nothing seemed normal anymore. David tried to go on with his life, pretending that everything was fine, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. Ever since that phone call, he had felt like someone was watching him. When he left his house in the morning, he noticed small details he'd never paid attention to before. A car parked across the street with dark windows. A man sitting inside pretending to look at his phone. A drone hovering too long in the evening sky. He told himself he was being paranoid, that it was just his imagination. But it was hard to ignore the feeling that his quiet, ordinary life was slowly being pulled into something bigger and darker. He stopped sleeping well. Every sound at night, a door creak, a car passing, even the wind, made him wake up and check the windows. One morning, he found a folded piece of paper slipped under his front door again. It was plain, just like before, but this time, there were only 2 words written on it. "They're watching." He stared at it for a long time, trying to understand who it was meant for. Was it a threat? A warning? Or maybe someone was trying to help him? By that afternoon, he couldn't take it anymore. He went to the small police station downtown and spoke with one of the officers he'd met before. The man listened carefully as David explained about the SUV, the note, and the strange phone call. The officer sighed and looked concerned. "You should have told us sooner," he said. "We've been trying to trace those suspects, but it's been complicated. They disappeared right after the incident." "Do you think it's connected?" David asked quietly. "Maybe," the officer replied, "but it's also possible someone's trying to scare you for attention. Your story was on the news. People do strange things." David nodded, though he didn't believe that completely. Before he left, the officer told him to stay alert and call immediately if he noticed anything unusual again. That night, David double-checked all the locks, closed the curtains, and kept his phone by his bed, but sleep wouldn't come. He lay there for hours, his mind turning everything over. The child, the van, the black SUV, and now the mysterious note. Sometime after midnight, he heard it again, an engine outside, slow, heavy. He pulled the curtain back just enough to see. The same black SUV was parked across the street. The headlights were off, but he could see the faint glow of the dashboard light inside. His heart pounded. He considered calling the police. But then the vehicle began to move, slowly rolling down the road before turning the corner and disappearing into the night. By morning, he decided he needed answers. He started by visiting the diner where everything began. The alley looked normal again, trash bins lined up, delivery trucks coming and going, but the memory of that day was still sharp. The waitress who had served him recognized him immediately. "You're back," she said with a smile. Everyone's still talking about what you did. That boy's mother came by last week. She was asking if you'd been around. David's eyes widened. She was here? What did she say? She didn't say much, the waitress said, lowering her voice. Just that she wanted to thank you in person. But she looked nervous, kept checking her phone like she was waiting for someone. David nodded slowly. Do you know where she went? The waitress shook her head. She left quickly. Got into a black SUV parked outside. The words hit him like a punch. He left the diner and sat in his truck for a while, trying to make sense of it all. If the boy's mother was connected to that same vehicle, what did that mean? Was she being watched too? Or was she the one behind it? He couldn't stop thinking about the phone number the mysterious man had given him. Maybe it was time to call again. Back at home, he sat on the edge of his bed staring at the small white card with only a number written on it. His hand hesitated over the phone. He took a deep breath and dialed. The same calm voice answered. I told you we'd be in touch, it said. Who are you? David demanded. You keep saying you want to help, but you haven't told me anything. What's going on? There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice said, It's better for you not to know too much. But since you called, you deserve a little truth. David listened silently, gripping the phone tighter. The boy you saved, the voice continued, was not just any child. His family has been under surveillance for months. Some people want something his father has, something valuable. What you did was brave, but it exposed you. The men in the van weren't random criminals. They worked for someone powerful, and now they know who you are. David's mouth went dry. What do they want with me? You saw their faces, the voice said. That's enough. For a moment, David didn't speak. He could hear faint static on the line. So what do I do now? He asked finally. The voice lowered. Stay calm. Don't talk to anyone about this. Not the police. Not your neighbors. We're keeping an eye on you, but you need to trust us. If anything happens, go somewhere public and wait. We'll find you. Then the line went dead. David sat there for a long time, staring at the silent phone in his hand. He didn't know who we was, but something told him this wasn't just about the boy anymore. Later that evening, he went for a walk around the block to clear his head. The air was cool and the streetlights flickered softly. He passed a small park where a few kids were playing basketball and an elderly couple was walking their dog. Everything seemed normal again, peaceful even. But as he turned the corner toward his house, he noticed something that made him stop cold. A dark car, not the SUV this time, but a smaller black sedan, was parked across from his home. The driver sat still, hands on the wheel, engine running. David slowed down, pretending to check his phone. The driver didn't move. Then, just as before, the car pulled away quietly and turned at the end of the street. He felt his pulse quicken. Whoever these people were, they weren't going away. That night, he couldn't sleep again. He sat on his couch, the TV on low volume, just to break the silence. Around 2 a.m., his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "We told you not to go to the police." He froze. His first instinct was to delete the message, but he didn't. He kept reading it over and over, wondering how they knew. He hadn't told anyone about his visit to the police, not even his closest friend from the shop. He realized then that whoever these people were, they had access to more than he could imagine. The next day, he went to work as usual, but his mind wasn't on the job. Every sound from outside made him jump. Every customer who came in felt suspicious. In the afternoon, a delivery truck arrived with a new shipment of tools. The driver handed him a small brown box with no label. David assumed it was a part he had ordered, so he opened it right there in the shop. Inside was a small phone, not new but clean and functional, with a single sticky note attached. It said, "Use this." "We'll call tonight." He stared at it, half tempted to throw it away, but curiosity and fear won. That night, just after sunset, the phone rang. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. The same calm voice said, "Good, you got the package." "What do you want from me?" David asked. "I didn't do anything wrong." "We don't want anything," the voice replied. "We just need to keep you safe. There are people who think you know more than you do. You're not in trouble, but you need to follow our instructions. Understand?" David nodded, even though they couldn't see him. "Yes, good," the voice said. "For the next few days, keep your routine the same. Don't change your habits. Act normal. We'll be in touch when it's time to move. Move? David repeated, confused, but the line had already gone silent. He put the phone down, feeling his stomach twist. He didn't know who was protecting him or who was after him anymore. All he knew was that he had become a piece in a game he didn't understand. Outside, the night air felt heavier than usual. Somewhere down the street, an engine started and then stopped again. David sat near the window, staring out into the darkness. Every shadow looked suspicious now. Every sound made him tense. He didn't realize how deep he was in until that moment, how saving one child had changed his whole life. He whispered to himself, almost as if trying to make sense of it. What did I get myself into? But no one answered. The only response was the soft hum of a car engine somewhere outside, idling in the dark, waiting. And deep down, David knew that whatever was happening, it was far from over. The next few days moved slowly, like time itself had grown heavier. David followed every instruction the voice on the phone had given him. He tried to act normal, opening his shop, working on cars, greeting customers with a tired smile. But inside, he felt like he was living two lives, one that everyone could see, and one that existed quietly in the background, full of questions and fear. The phone they'd given him stayed in his pocket at all times. It didn't ring again, but somehow he knew they were still watching. He started noticing more strange things around him. The same black sedan appeared parked across the street at least 3 different times that week. A man with a camera stood near the gas station one morning, pretending to take photos of the building, but every few minutes, his lens turned toward David's shop. It was subtle, but it wasn't his imagination anymore. On Friday afternoon, while closing up the garage, he heard someone call his name. He turned and saw a man walking toward him, tall, wearing sunglasses and a dark coat. "I just want to talk," the man said, holding up his hands. David stepped back slightly. "Who are you?" The man stopped a few feet away. "You don't know me, but I work for the family of the boy you saved." That caught David's attention. "The boy's family?" The man nodded. "They've been trying to reach you, but it's complicated. They're being watched too," David frowned. "Watched by who?" The man took off his sunglasses, revealing tired eyes. "People who want to control something his father created. Something worth a lot of money, and maybe more than that." David didn't understand. "I don't know anything about that. I just saved a kid." "I know," the man said softly. "But by doing that, you got their attention. They think you know more than you do. That's why you've been followed." David crossed his arms. "So who's been calling me? Who sent that phone?" The man looked uneasy. "That's not us," he said. "Whoever they are, they're not with the boy's family." That answer made David's stomach twist. "Then who are they?" The man shook his head. "You don't want to know. The best thing you can do is stay quiet. They'll lose interest eventually." He turned to leave, but before he did, he said one last thing. "If anyone asks you about the boy, deny everything. Don't trust anyone who contacts you, not even people who claim to be from the police." Then he walked away, disappearing around the corner. David stood there for a long moment, watching him go. The air felt heavy again. He didn't know who to believe anymore. That night, as he sat in his living room, the small phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out slowly, half expecting another cryptic message. Instead, it was a call. He hesitated, then answered. "You met someone today," the familiar, calm voice said. David's heart raced. "You're still watching me?" The voice ignored his question. "He's not who he says he is. Don't believe him." "He said he worked for the boy's family," David replied. The voice paused. "That's what they want you to think. There are people pretending to protect the family, but they're really trying to get closer to them and to you. You're safer with us." "I don't even know who you are," David said, his voice rising slightly. "Why should I trust any of you?" "Because you're still alive," the voice said calmly. The line went dead again. David sat there staring at the phone, feeling trapped between two invisible sides. One said they were protecting him. The other said they wanted to thank him. Both were keeping secrets. He barely slept that night. When he did, his dreams were filled with flashes of headlights, shadows watching from windows, and the boy's frightened face. The next morning, he decided to take control. If no one would tell him the truth, he'd find it himself. He started by driving back to the neighborhood where the boy had lived, at least, the one he had heard mentioned on the news. It was an upscale area, quiet streets lined with big trees and larger houses. Security cameras watched from every gate. He parked down the street and walked past the houses slowly, trying not to draw attention. He didn't know what he expected to find, but he wanted to see where the family lived. Maybe it would help him understand what was really happening. Halfway down the block, he stopped. There, parked in the driveway of one of the houses, was a familiar black SUV. He felt his chest tighten. He'd seen that same vehicle outside his house before. A man in a dark suit stood near the garage, speaking into an earpiece. Another man carried a box from the back of the SUV into the house. David quickly crossed the street and hid behind a large tree. He watched for a while, trying to make sense of it. The men looked like private security and professional, alert. After a few minutes, one of them stepped outside and looked straight toward where David was standing. Their eyes met for a second, and the man's expression changed. Recognition, maybe. David didn't wait to find out. He turned and walked quickly back to his truck, heart racing. As soon as he started the engine, the SUV's headlights came on behind him. He pulled away from the curb, trying to stay calm. But the SUV followed. He turned once. It turned two. He took another turn down a smaller road. Still there. Finally, he turned sharply into a gas station and parked near the convenience store. The SUV drove past slowly, then disappeared into traffic. David sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. He realized he wasn't safe anywhere now. Whoever these people were, they knew who he was, and they were watching every move he made. When he got home that evening, a small envelope was waiting on his porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a photo of him standing in front of the boy's house earlier that day. On the back, written in black ink, were 3 words: "You were warned." He dropped the photo, his hands trembling. It was clear now someone was tracking him closely, and they didn't want him asking questions. The next few days were tense. He barely ate, barely slept. He kept thinking about calling the police again, but the voice's warning echoed in his head. Don't trust anyone. Then one night he got another call on the secret phone. "We told you not to go near the family," the voice said firmly. "Now they know you're looking." "I just wanted answers," David said, exhausted. "I didn't ask for any of this." "We understand," the voice replied. "But it's too late to walk away now. Listen carefully. Tomorrow morning someone will come to your shop. Don't ask questions. Just give them the box they hand you. It's important," David frowned. "What's in the box?" "It's better if you don't know," the voice said. "But it will keep you safe." Then the call ended again. By now David was used to the confusion, the half-truths, the strange instructions. But this time something felt different, more urgent. The next morning he opened the shop early. The streets were quiet, and the sky was still gray from dawn. Around 9 o'clock a delivery van pulled up. A young man stepped out, handed him a small sealed box, and said nothing. He just nodded once and walked away. The box was light, wrapped in brown paper. No label. David stared at it for a long time before deciding to open it. Inside was a small black device, like a phone tracker, and a folded note that said, "Keep this with you. You'll know when to use it." He didn't know what to think anymore. He set the box aside and tried to focus on work, but his hands kept trembling. Every time he heard a car outside, he looked up, expecting to see that SUV again. By evening, he was too restless to stay inside. He drove out to a nearby park, hoping the open air would clear his mind. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Families were walking their dogs, children running around. All of it looked peaceful, like the kind of life he used to have before everything changed. He sat on a bench, looking at the horizon. For a few minutes he actually felt calm again. Then his phone buzzed. A message appeared on the secret device. "Leave the park. Now." His heart jumped. He looked around. Nothing seemed unusual. People laughing, birds chirping, cars passing. Then he noticed it. Parked near the entrance of the park, a black SUV, headlights off. He stood slowly, his pulse quickening. He walked quickly to his truck and started the engine. As he pulled away, the SUV's headlights came on and followed at a distance. He didn't go home. Instead, he drove aimlessly through side streets and old roads until the SUV finally disappeared from his mirror. When he finally got back home that night, he sat in the driveway for a long time, breathing hard. His phone buzzed one more time. Good. You listened. You're still safe. For now. He put the phone down, staring out at the dark street. He didn't know who was protecting him anymore, or if anyone really was. But one thing was clear. This wasn't about one boy, one rescue, or one family. It was about something much bigger, something that had pulled him into its center without his choice. And deep down, he knew the truth was coming. He just wasn't sure if he was ready to hear it. Days turned into weeks, but the strange feeling of being watched never went away. Every morning he'd wake up before sunrise, open the curtains just slightly, and look out at the street. Most days, nothing seemed out of place. A few cars passing, neighbors heading to work. But sometimes he'd catch a glimpse of something that made his stomach tighten. A parked car with tinted windows. A figure standing at the corner too long. A camera flash in the distance. He tried to live normally. He kept fixing cars, taking small repair jobs, pretending everything was fine. But his customers noticed the difference. His smile was forced now, and his hand sometimes shook when he handed back a receipt. He'd laugh it off, say he was tired, but deep down he knew he was running out of strength to keep pretending. The small black device he'd received sat hidden in his drawer. He hadn't touched it since the night it arrived. Sometimes he'd think about throwing it away, but then he'd remember the messages, the warnings, and the way the black SUV always seemed to appear when he least expected it. One cold morning, as he walked to his shop, he noticed something different. There was a white envelope taped to the door. No name, no handwriting, just a plain envelope. He looked around before taking it down. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short message typed neatly across it. It's time you know the truth. Meet us where it all started. 9 p.m. No name, no address. But he knew what it meant, the parking lot behind the diner. He spent the rest of the day restless. Every sound made him jump. Every car that passed by made him glance at the window. He told himself not to go, that it was too risky. But deep down he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. As the sun set, he locked up his shop early and drove toward the diner. The city lights shimmered against the dark sky, but the streets were mostly quiet. His heart beat faster the closer he got. When he arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Only a few streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the ground. He parked a short distance away and waited. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then he saw headlights approaching. Slow, steady, deliberate. A black SUV pulled in and stopped about 20 feet from him. His hands gripped the steering wheel, but he didn't move. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, wearing a long dark coat. His face was hidden by the shadows. The man raised a hand, signaling for him to come closer. He hesitated, then finally got out of his truck. "Who are you?" he called out. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward him, stopping just a few steps away. "You did something brave," the man said finally. "You saved a life. But you also stepped into something you weren't supposed to see." He swallowed hard. "I don't care about your secrets. I just want this to stop." The watching, the messages, the following, the man nodded slowly. "It's almost over. That's why we're here." He didn't know what that meant, but before he could ask, another door of the SUV opened. A woman stepped out, dressed simply, holding something close to her chest. It was a small backpack, the same one the little boy had worn that day. She looked up at him with tired eyes. "You saved my son," she said softly. "I've wanted to thank you in person for weeks, but it wasn't safe until now." He froze. "You're his mother?" She nodded. "My husband created something people wanted to steal. Those men who tried to take our child were hired to use him as leverage. You stopped them. You changed everything that day." He tried to take it in. "So all this time I've been watched because of that?" The man beside her spoke again. "Yes, some of the people you saw were ours. We needed to make sure you stayed alive. Others weren't so kind. There are still people out there who think you know more than you do." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know anything. I just saw a kid in trouble." The woman smiled sadly. "And that's exactly why you were the one who could help." For the first time in weeks, he felt a little lighter. Someone was finally talking to him like a person, not a problem to be handled. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded paper. "This is a new address," he said. "We're leaving the city." It's safer for us and for you. Once we go, they'll stop watching. You'll be free from this." He took the paper, unsure what to say. "How do you know that?" "Because they'll believe you've been dealt with," the man replied. "We'll make sure of it." Those words chilled him. "What do you mean, dealt with?" The man gave a faint smile. "Nothing harmful. Just a message. They'll think you've left too." He looked at the paper in his hand. There was no address, just a single sentence. "You did the right thing. It's time to disappear." He looked up again, but the woman and man were already walking back toward the SUV. "Wait," he called out. "What about your son? Is he okay?" The woman turned, her eyes soft. "He's safe. Because of you. That's all you need to know." Then they got into the SUV and drove away, leaving him standing there in the quiet parking lot, the sound of the engine fading into the night. For a long time, he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the empty space where the car had been. He should have felt relieved, but instead he felt empty. So many questions still lingered, and now it seemed like he'd never get the answers. The next morning, he went to his shop as usual. Everything looked the same, the tools, the cars, the smell of oil and metal. But the feeling was different. It was like the world had shifted slightly and only he could tell. Around midday, he heard a knock at the door. A delivery man stood there with a small brown package. "For you," he said. There was no sender listed. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single envelope and a small black key. The note inside read, "Go to the storage unit listed below. You deserve to know." The address was on the other side of town. For a moment, he thought about ignoring it. Maybe it was another trap. But something inside him, curiosity, maybe closure, told him to go. He drove there that evening. The storage facility was quiet. Just rows of metal doors and bright white lights. The key fit perfectly into unit number 27. When he lifted the door, he froze. Inside was a small box with a familiar drawing taped to the lid, a child's crayon sketch of a man standing next to a little boy. Both smiling. It was him and the boy he'd saved. His eyes softened. He opened the box carefully. Inside were several photos, newspaper clippings, and a small flash drive. One of the photos showed the boy and his mother at what looked like a park smiling. There was also another note inside, written in neat handwriting. "We wanted you to know we're safe now. You gave us another chance at life. The world can be dangerous, but people like you remind us it's still good. Thank you, and from both of us." He sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. The tension in his chest finally began to fade. When he stepped outside, the air felt cleaner, lighter. The sky was starting to turn golden from the setting sun. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like someone was watching him. That night, he went home and sat on his porch watching the quiet street. He thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the confusion, the strange phone calls, the black SUV. He realized something important. Maybe he'd never understand the whole story. Maybe he wasn't meant to. But he'd done what mattered. He'd helped someone when they needed it most, and that was enough. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the cool air on his face. Somewhere out there, a little boy was safe with his family. And somewhere deep down, he felt peace for the first time in a long while. As the night grew darker, a car passed by slowly. Not an SUV this time, just an ordinary car with a family inside, laughing together. He smiled faintly and closed his eyes. The world still had shadows, he knew that now, but it also had light. Quiet, steady, human light that shined in the unlikeliest of moments. And though his life would never quite return to what it was, he understood something simple and true. Doing the right thing doesn't always bring peace right away, but it always matters. It always leaves a mark. Not on the world, maybe, but on the heart. He stood, stretched, and went inside. On his kitchen table, the small box from the storage unit sat open, the drawing on top. He smiled at it one last time before turning off the light. Outside, the night was calm. No headlights, no strange cars. Just silence, the kind that feels safe. And in that silence, he finally let himself breathe again.